The Anderson Financial Group's boardroom hadn't changed in the 20 years since our father first brought me here. The same mahogany table, the same leather chairs, the same oil painting of the Boston Harbor that had washed over 3 generations of our family's leadership. But today, everything was different. I moved to formally remove David Anderson from the board of directors, my sister Elizabeth announced, her voice carrying the precise tone of corporate authority she perfected over the years. Following my acquisition of his shares during his unfortunate absence, he no longer has any standing in this company. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching the drama unfold exactly as I'd expected it would. The other board members, mostly Elizabeth's carefully cultivated allies, nodded in agreement. They saw what they wanted to see, the competent older sister cleaning up after her irresponsible younger brother. If only they knew. David, Elizabeth continued, not bothering to hide her smirk. You should leave now. Security will escort you out. 2 guards appeared behind my chair. I could feel the pity in their glances. They'd known me since I was a kid running through these halls, learning the business at our father's knee. Now they were about to escort me out like a common trespasser. Actually, I said, opening my laptop, I think we should review some interesting transactions I've discovered first. Elizabeth's perfectly maintained composure flickered for just a moment. There's nothing to review. The share transfer documents are clear. While you were in the hospital. Ah yes, my 3-month stay in the hospital, I interrupted softly. When I was fighting for my life after that mysterious car accident, the perfect time to arrange a share transfer, wouldn't you say? The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. I looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. Would anyone like to know what I was doing before that accident? What I discovered in our company's books. This is ridiculous, Elizabeth snapped, but I could see the fear beginning to creep into her eyes. Security, remove him. Touch me, I said to the guards without looking back, and the SEC gets an email containing everything I found, including the real reason behind Dad's sudden retirement last year. The guards hesitated. Elizabeth's face went pale. But let me back up. To understand how we got here, how the Anderson siblings' rivalry turned into corporate warfare. You need to know what happened 6 months ago, when I first noticed something wrong with our company's numbers. I'd always been the more detail-oriented sibling. While Elizabeth focused on networking and climbing the corporate ladder, I'd immersed myself in the actual operations of Anderson Financial. Every spreadsheet, every audit, every transaction. I knew our business inside and out. It started with a discrepancy in our Asian market investments, a series of trades that didn't quite add up, profits that appeared too good to be true. Most people would have written it off as exceptional performance, but I'd learned from our father that in finance, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. You're being paranoid, David, Elizabeth had said when I first raised concerns. The Asian division is doing brilliantly, just because you can't match their performance in your sectors. But I kept digging. Late nights in the office, weekends poring over transaction records. The deeper I looked, the more I found. Not just accounting irregularities, but systematic fraud. Money laundering for certain clients. Tax evasion schemes disguised as investment strategies. And at the center of it all, a name that appeared too often to be coincidence. Elizabeth Anderson. I confronted our father first, showing him the evidence I'd gathered. His reaction stunned me. Leave it alone, son, he'd said, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Some stones are better left unturned. Dad, this is serious. Elizabeth is using our company for. I know, his interruption had been sharp, painful. Why do you think I'm retiring? The implications hit me like a physical blow. You know, you've known all along. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Your sister, she has a way of making things happen. Results that keep shareholders happy. Methods that, it's better not to look too closely. It's fraud, Dad, money laundering. Maybe worse. It's business, he'd replied warily. The kind that keeps hundreds of people employed, that funds pensions, that maintains our family's position. I'd left his office that day with my world shaken. The father I'd idolized, the moral compass who'd taught me about business ethics, was choosing to look the other way. But I couldn't. For the next month, I gathered evidence, created backups, established secure channels with regulatory authorities. I was careful, or so I thought. Then came the accident. A brake failure on a mountain road. 3 months in the hospital fighting for my life. And while I was unconscious, Elizabeth moved. The share transfer documents looked perfect. My signature, witnesses, notarization, all technically flawless, except I'd never signed them. Never agreed to sell my 30% stake in our family's company to my sister for a fraction of its value. By the time I was conscious enough to protest, it was too late. Elizabeth controlled 67% of Anderson Financial. Our father had mysteriously decided to enjoy his retirement in a villa in Spain, conveniently unreachable. The old David Anderson, the trusting younger brother who believed in playing by the rules, died in that hospital room. The man who emerged was different, quieter, more patient. For 2 months after my release, I played the part they expected, the defeated sibling stripped of his birthright, nursing his wounds in exile. I sold my penthouse, moved into a modest apartment, started making noise about exploring other opportunities. Elizabeth relaxed. Her perfect coup seemed complete. But she'd forgotten something crucial about me. Something our father used to say, David sees the details others miss. And in finance, the devil isn't just in the details, he lives there. While everyone thought I was licking my wounds, I was building my case. Every transaction Elizabeth had ever touched, every client she brought in, every deal that seemed too good to be true. And I found patterns, connections, a web of financial manipulation that went far beyond what I'd initially discovered. The evidence currently stored on my laptop would destroy not just Elizabeth's career, but the careers of half the people in this boardroom. The only question was who would see it first, the board or the federal authorities. Now, sitting at the end of that mahogany table, watching my sister's composure crack, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Would anyone like to see what I found? I asked the room quietly, or should we discuss how this plays out? Elizabeth's lawyer started to speak, but she silenced him with a sharp gesture. She knew me well enough to recognize the tone in my voice. The same tone I used when we were kids, and I caught her in a lie. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I smiled, thinking of all the nights I'd spent building my case, of the pain during physical therapy, of our father's betrayal. "Want? Dear sister, I don't want anything." I opened my laptop screen. "I just think it's time for the truth to come out. All of it." And then I began to show them exactly what I discovered. The boardroom's tension could have been cut with a knife as I connected my laptop to the presentation screen. Elizabeth remained frozen in her chair, her usual confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. "Let's start with the Preston Holdings acquisition." I began, pulling up a series of transaction records. On paper, it looked like a masterful deal. Elizabeth acquired a $500 million company for just $300 million. The board celebrated her negotiating skills. I clicked to the next slide. But here's what really happened. Preston Holdings was never worth $500 million. The valuation was artificially inflated through a series of fake contracts and phantom clients, all created by shell companies that coincidentally traced back to a certain law firm in the Cayman Islands. "This is nonsense," Elizabeth interrupted, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" I pulled up another document. This is the registration paperwork for Ocean Vista Limited, the main shell company. Notice the founding partner's signature. Look familiar, Elizabeth? She went pale. It was her signature, carefully disguised but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Preston Holdings was worth barely $100 million, I continued. But Elizabeth arranged for Anderson Financial to pay $300 million, with the excess $200 million flowing through those shell companies and back to. Well, let's see where the money went. The next series of slides showed a complex web of international transfers, each carefully structured to avoid detection. By the time I finished tracing the money flow, several board members looked physically ill. "My God," whispered Henry Blackwood, our oldest board member. "How long has this been going on?" 5 years, I replied, "since Elizabeth became CEO. But it gets better. Should we talk about the Asian market miracle next? Or perhaps the real reason behind Dad's sudden retirement?" "Stop." Elizabeth's voice was barely audible. "Please." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The perfectly tailored suit, the expensive jewelry, the careful makeup. All part of the image she'd crafted of the brilliant CEO. The financial wizard who could do no wrong. "Why?" I asked simply. Why wasn't legitimate success enough? You don't understand, she hissed. The pressure, the expectations. Do you know what it's like being a woman in this industry? Having to be twice as good, twice as successful. So you decided to cheat, to steal, to try to kill me when I got too close to the truth. The boardroom erupted in gasps. Elizabeth's face went from pale to ashen. That's right, I continued, my voice hardening. The brake lines in my car didn't just fail spontaneously. I have the mechanic's testimony and the security footage showing who visited the parking garage the night before my accident. You can't prove that, Elizabeth whispered, but we both knew I could. I turned to address the board directly. While I was in the hospital, fighting for my life, my dear sister arranged to have my shares transferred to her control. The signatures are forgeries, the witnesses were bribed, and I have proof of all of it. What do you want? Henry Blackwood asked, his voice heavy with the weight of betrayal. The authorities should be here any minute, I finished for him. I contacted the SEC and FBI last week. They've been building their case independently, verifying everything I discovered. As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened. Federal agents streamed in, led by a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. Elizabeth Anderson, she announced. I'm Special Agent Sarah Martinez. We have some questions about your financial dealings. What followed was a blur of activity. Elizabeth was led away in handcuffs, her lawyer frantically making calls. Board members were served with subpoenas. The company's servers were seized. But before Elizabeth reached the door, she turned back to me. You've destroyed everything, she said bitterly. The company, the family name. No, I corrected her quietly. You did that. I'm just bringing back the truth. Hours later, after the agents had finished their initial sweep, I sat alone in my father's old office. The sun was setting over Boston Harbor, casting long shadows across the space where I'd spent so much of my childhood. My phone buzzed. A message from Dad in Spain. Is it done? Yes, I replied. Elizabeth's been arrested. The truth is out. His response came quickly. I should have listened to you sooner. I'm sorry. I stared at those words for a long time, thinking about family, loyalty, and the true meaning of legacy. Then I began typing. Come home, Dad. We have a company to rebuild. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. Elizabeth pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, accepting a 15-year sentence rather than face a public trial. Several board members resigned in disgrace. The company's stock took a heavy hit when the news broke. But something unexpected happened too. As we cleaned house and implemented new transparency measures, clients began returning. Many had suspected something wasn't quite right under Elizabeth's leadership, but hadn't known where to turn. I was named interim CEO, though I insisted on an independent board majority and external oversight. The lessons of power concentration were not lost on me. 1 year later, I sat in that same boardroom where the confrontation had taken place. The mahogany table still gleamed, the harbor painting still washed over us. But everything else had changed. Our father had returned from Spain, not as an executive but as an advisor, helping us rebuild trust with long-term clients. He was different now, humbler, more willing to acknowledge past mistakes. You've done something remarkable, he told me after a particularly successful quarter. You've brought honor back to the Anderson name. Not just me, I replied. Everyone who chose truth over convenience, ethics over easy profits. The company's new slogan, displayed prominently in our lobby, read, Success through integrity. It wasn't just words. We'd implemented stringent oversight measures, established anonymous reporting channels, and created an independent ethics committee. Elizabeth's story became a cautionary tale in business schools, a case study in how the pressure to succeed at any cost can corrupt even the most promising executives. As for me, I kept the modest apartment, drove a reasonable car, and focused on rebuilding not just our company's wealth, but its soul. Late one evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Elizabeth, written from federal prison. Dear David, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, to the company, to our family, to you. The hardest part isn't the prison sentence or the public disgrace. It's knowing that I became everything our parents once taught us to fight against. You were right. Legitimate success would have been enough. I just couldn't see it through my own ambition. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know you did the right thing. Elizabeth. I placed the letter in my desk drawer. next to the photo of our family from happier times. Then I turned back to my work, reviewing audit reports, checking compliance measures, ensuring that what happened under Elizabeth's leadership could never happen again. Because in the end, true success isn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It's measured in the strength of our principles, in our willingness to stand for what's right, even when it costs us everything we thought we wanted. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying our enemies, but in rebuilding what they tried to corrupt. The Anderson Financial Group survived its darkest chapter, emerging stronger, more transparent, and more committed to its ethical foundations than ever before. Not because of complex financial strategies or aggressive acquisitions, but because one person refused to look the other way when confronted with wrongdoing. As I finally headed home that evening, I paused in the lobby to read the company's mission statement, newly etched in glass. In finance, numbers tell stories, but character reveals truth. Some stories, I've learned, are worth more than all the fraudulent profits in the world. And some truths, once revealed, can set entire families free.